Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today, we're diving into a tragic and haunting case that shook all of Sweden. It's a story of obsession, heartbreak, and brutal violence. One that will undoubtedly make you cry. In 2008, the peaceful life of Emma Young Stig, a mother of two, was shattered by one of the most horrifying crimes in Swedish history. This case gripped the entire nation, and even now its brutality and tragedy continue to resonate. In psychology, there's a term called Adolphe syndrome, named after the daughter of the famous French writer Victor Hugo. This syndrome describes a dangerous form of obsession where one person becomes so fixated on another that they lose control over their emotions. Sometimes this kind of obsession can lead individuals to do desperate and violent things. Unfortunately, the case we're discussing today is a chilling example of just how far obsession can push someone. Emma Young Stig was born on February 16, 1985 in Stockholm, Sweden. She grew up in a modest family as the younger of two daughters, living a typical childhood in the city. Her older sister, Christina, was always by her side, and the two shared a close bond throughout their early years. Emma's life seemed to follow a normal course until she met Nicholas, the man who would later become her husband. At just 19 years old, Emma married Nicholas, a young man she had been dating since high school. Their relationship, though young and passionate, soon became complicated as they started their family. Emma gave birth to their first child, a son named Max, at the age of 20. Just a year and a half later, they welcomed a daughter, Saga. Although they were blessed with two beautiful children, the realities of family life soon began to weigh on the young couple. Emma and Nicholas, still in their early 20s, found themselves struggling with the pressures of raising a family while they were both still trying to figure out their own lives. Financial difficulties and the stress of everyday life created tension between them. They constantly argued, often over trivial matters, and over time, their relationship began to deteriorate. By the time their daughter Saga was born, the couple had reached a breaking point. They could no longer see eye to eye and decided to separate. Their split, however, was far from amicable. Disagreements over custody of the children added to the strain. While both Emma and Nicholas loved Max and Saga deeply, they couldn't agree on how to co-parent. This led to numerous legal battles, with each parent fighting for sole custody, setting the stage for the tragic events that would later unfold. After her separation from Nicholas, Emma sought a fresh start. In the midst of the emotional and legal turmoil surrounding the custody of her two children, Max and Saga, she met Hellberg through an online forum. Torny was a kind and understanding man, and despite the challenges Emma faced as a young mother, the two quickly bonded. Their relationship moved fast, and soon Emma decided to leave Stockholm and relocate to a small town called Aruga, about 150 kilometers away, where Torny lived. She took her children with her, hoping for a new beginning. However, Nicholas was not happy with this decision. He objected strongly to Emma moving the children so far away, arguing that it would prevent him from seeing Max and Saga regularly. This fueled even more custody battles, with Nicholas fighting to keep his children close. Despite his efforts, Emma was determined to build a life with Torny, and the legal struggles between her and Nicholas intensified. Torny, though aware of the difficulties, accepted Emma and her children wholeheartedly. He had always dreamed of having a family and was ready to embrace Max and Saga as his own. The couple initially lived in a small house that Torny had inherited, which they quickly made into a cozy home. Although things were far from perfect, their love for each other and the children gave them hope for the future. In the summer of 2008, Emma and Torny had plans to get married. They envisioned a simple but meaningful ceremony with close family and friends. Life seemed to be falling into place for Emma, despite the ongoing struggles with Nicholas. She looked forward to a peaceful life with her new partner, but fate had something much darker in store for the young family. On March 17, 2008, the day began like any other for Emma Young Stig. Torny Hellberg left early in the morning for work, while Emma stayed home with their children, 3-year-old Max and 1.5-year-old Saga. It was an ordinary Monday in their quiet life, filled with typical household tasks and caring for the children. Emma had plans to prepare dinner for the family that evening and was looking forward to Torny's return from work. Little did she know that by the end of the day, her life would be shattered beyond repair. As the evening approached, Emma continued with her daily routine. At around 6:30 p.m., she received a call from Torny, who was running late from work. He assured her that everything was fine and suggested that she and the children go ahead and have dinner without him. Emma agreed and continued to tend to the kids in the house. A little later, she sat down at her computer to chat with her older sister, Christina, discussing plans for their parents' upcoming wedding anniversary. The conversation was light and casual, with Emma texting back and forth while juggling her responsibilities as a mother. Then, at exactly 7:07 p.m., their communication was abruptly cut off. Emma was in the middle of typing a message, but it never got sent. Christina noticed the sudden silence and felt an immediate sense of unease. She called Emma's phone, but there was no answer. Thinking perhaps Emma had gotten distracted by the children, Christina tried to shake off the feeling of dread. Still concerned, she reached out to Torny, who was on his way home. He reassured her, saying that Emma was likely busy and that everything was fine. He was only minutes away from the house and would check on things when he arrived. At 7:20 p.m., just 13 minutes after Emma's last message, Torny arrived at the house. As he approached, he noticed that the front door was slightly ajar. At first, he didn't think much of it, assuming that Emma might have left it open while looking after the children. But as he stepped inside, he was greeted by an unsettling silence. The usual noise of the children playing or Emma bustling about was absent. Something felt wrong. Torny called out for Emma, Max, and Saga, but there was no response. As he walked further into the house, he began to notice a mess. Furniture was overturned, and toys were scattered. At first, he thought the children had been playing rough, but then he saw something that made his blood run cold. Dark red stains on the floor. His mind raced as he tried to process what he was seeing. The stains were unmistakably blood, and panic set in. In the hallway, Torny spotted what he initially thought was a doll lying on the floor in a twisted, unnatural position. But as he got closer, he realized in horror that it was little Saga lying in a pool of her own blood. Her face was brutally disfigured beyond recognition. Nearby, Max's lifeless body lay in a similar state with a fractured skull. Both children had been savagely attacked. Torny's heart sank as he frantically searched for Emma, hoping against hope that she was still alive. He found her collapsed on the floor, covered in blood, her face shattered and body motionless. Shaking with fear and disbelief, Torny pulled out his phone with trembling hands and dialed the emergency number. His voice barely held together as he reported what he had found. Paramedics and police arrived on the scene within minutes. The sight that awaited them was horrifying. Emma and her children had been attacked with a level of violence that was beyond comprehension. Blood spattered the floors and walls, and the house was in disarray. Miraculously, when paramedics checked the victims, they found faint pulses in all three. Despite their severe injuries, Emma, Max, and Saga were clinging to life. The paramedics rushed to stabilize them and transported them to the nearest hospital. Emma had been placed in a medically induced coma to give her body a chance to heal. Max and Saga, however, were in critical condition. The doctors held little hope for the children's survival, given the extent of their brain injuries and the massive blood loss they had suffered. Even if they could be saved, they would likely never regain their normal function. As the medical teams fought to save the victims, forensic experts began their investigation at the scene. The chaotic state of the house, combined with the presence of the paramedics, made it difficult to piece together exactly what had happened. There were no clear signs of forced entry, and the only possible clue was that the front door had been left unlocked, indicating that Emma may have known her attacker and willingly let them in. By the end of that harrowing night, the lives of 3 people had been irreversibly changed. Max and Saga, despite all efforts to save them, succumbed to their injuries and passed away without regaining consciousness. Emma, barely hanging on to life, became the only survivor of the brutal attack, left to face the unimaginable loss of her children and the horror of what had happened in their once peaceful home. While the doctors fought to keep Emma alive, the police began their investigation into the horrific crime. With no clear signs of forced entry and no immediate witnesses, the authorities initially focused their attention on those closest to Emma. The first person they questioned was Torny Hellberg, Emma's fiancé. After all, it was he who had discovered the crime scene, and in many cases, the person closest to the victims is considered a primary suspect. Torney, still in shock from the events he had witnessed, cooperated fully with the police. He recounted the timeline of his day, explaining how he had been at work and only arrived home around 7:20 p.m., just minutes after Emma's communication with her sister had abruptly stopped. The police interrogated him thoroughly, searching for any inconsistencies in his story. Torney's emotions were raw. He was visibly distraught and struggled to come to terms with the loss of the children and the brutal attack on Emma. However, as the investigation continued, Torney's alibi was confirmed. His boss and co-workers testified that he had indeed been at work during the time of the crime. Moreover, surveillance footage from multiple cameras captured him walking through the streets on his way home at the time of the attacks. With a solid alibi and no motive, the police cleared him as a suspect and released him. Despite Torney's innocence, the cloud of suspicion initially placed on him only added to his grief. Not only had he lost Max and Saga, two children he had grown to love as his own, but Emma, the woman he planned to marry, was still fighting for her life. The future they had been building together had been destroyed in a matter of minutes. Emma's family, especially her sister Christina, was also devastated. The loss of Max and Saga, combined with Emma's critical condition, left the family shattered. As the days passed, the investigation intensified. The police were determined to uncover the truth and bring the perpetrator to justice. They scoured the crime scene for clues, analyzed forensic evidence, and conducted interviews with anyone who might have had contact with Emma in the days leading up to the attack. The brutality of the crime suggested a deep personal motive, but the lack of obvious suspects left the investigation at a standstill. For Emma's family and Torney, the pain of losing Max and Saga was unbearable. The grief-stricken family could do little but wait for answers, hoping that justice would soon be served and that the person responsible for the heinous crime would be caught. With Torney Hellberg cleared as a suspect, the police turned their attention to another possible source of conflict in Emma's life: her ex-husband, Nicholas. Given the contentious history between Emma and Nicholas, particularly over the custody of their children, Max and Saga, it was natural for the investigators to consider him a potential suspect. The ongoing legal battles over custody had created significant tension between the two, and Emma had previously reported threats made by Nicholas to the police, raising suspicions that he could have been driven to commit such a heinous crime. Nicholas had struggled to come to terms with the fact that Emma had moved away with their children. The long distance between him and his kids made it difficult for him to see Max and Saga regularly, further fueling the animosity between him and Emma. In court, Nicholas had fought hard for more access to his children, and the custody disputes were both emotionally draining and bitter. These circumstances, coupled with the fact that Nicholas had made threats toward Emma, made him an immediate person of interest. When the police questioned Nicholas about his whereabouts on the night of the attack, his initial reaction was one of shock and disbelief. He appeared genuinely devastated upon hearing about the deaths of Max and Saga, repeatedly asking if there had been some mistake. Despite the tension in their relationship, Nicholas had always maintained that he loved his children dearly and would never harm them. Nevertheless, the investigators pursued their line of questioning, digging into Nicholas's activities on the day of the crime. He insisted that he had been away on business at the time of the attack, a claim that initially seemed suspicious due to its timing. However, as the investigation unfolded, Nicholas's alibi was corroborated. Witnesses confirmed that he had been in a different city, approximately 120 miles away from the scene of the crime, during the time of the murders. Additionally, hotel records and CCTV footage provided concrete evidence of his whereabouts. Despite the suspicions stemming from his previous threats and the bitter custody battle, Nicholas's alibi left no room for doubt. He had been far from the crime scene when the brutal attack took place. Reluctantly, the police were forced to clear him of any direct involvement in the murders. Though he was not involved in the physical crime, the lingering bitterness and the emotional toll of the custody fight between him and Emma remained a key part of the background leading up to the tragic events. With Nicholas ruled out as a suspect, the investigation once again hit a roadblock. The authorities were left grappling with the question of who could have committed such a brutal crime and why. The lack of physical evidence and the complexity of Emma's personal life meant that the investigation had to continue exploring every possible angle in order to uncover the truth behind the horrific murders of Max and Saga and the attempted murder of Emma. As the investigation continued, and both Torny Hellberg and Nicholas were cleared of suspicion, the police were left searching for another potential suspect. That's when a new lead emerged: Torny's ex-girlfriend, Christina Shurer. Torny had not initially mentioned Christina to the police, but when investigators reviewed surveillance footage near the crime scene, they noticed a suspicious figure. The footage showed a person dressed in black with a hood obscuring their face, walking near Emma and Torny's house shortly before the murders took place. The person appeared to be petite and frail, leading some to speculate that the figure could be a woman. When Torny was shown the footage, he grew pale. Almost immediately, he recognized the figure's build and mannerisms as those of Christina Shurer, his ex-girlfriend from several years ago. Despite the time that had passed since they ended their relationship, Christina had remained fixated on Torny, displaying disturbing, obsessive behavior that escalated as the years went on. Christina Shurer had a troubled past. Born in Hanover, Germany in 1977, her childhood had been marked by emotional turmoil. Her father left the family when she was young, causing deep emotional scars that would affect her relationships later in life. Christina grew up to be intelligent and ambitious, excelling in her studies in history and archaeology. She traveled extensively throughout Europe, participating in archaeological expeditions, and for a while lived in New York as part of an exchange program. But beneath her professional success, Christina struggled with emotional instability, and those closest to her often saw her darker side. In the summer of 2006, Christina met Torny while working as a tour guide on the Greek island of Crete. Torny, then on vacation, found her intelligent and charming at first. They began a romantic relationship, but soon after, Torny began to notice troubling signs. Christina was overly possessive and controlling, and when their relationship started to break down, she refused to let go. Even after Torny ended the relationship in early 2007, Christina wouldn't accept it. She continued to call and write to him, insisting that they should be together. Her behavior grew more erratic over time, with Christina even threatening self-harm if Torny didn't take her back. One of the most alarming incidents occurred when Christina falsely claimed to be pregnant with Torny's child. She contacted him out of the blue, saying that she had given birth to a son and placed him with a foster family. Torny, already skeptical due to their long separation, asked her for details, but her answers were vague and inconsistent. After investigating the matter himself, Torny discovered that the entire story had been fabricated. Christina's desperation to rekindle their relationship, even through lies, only deepened Torny's resolve to keep his distance from her. Despite Torny's attempts to cut her out of his life, Christina's obsession continued. She stalked him online, collecting photos of him and his new life with Emma. Police found a folder on Christina's laptop filled with pictures of Torny, Emma, and their children, which she had taken from their social media profiles. The photos were accompanied by disturbing captions, filled with anger and jealousy. Her fixation on Torny, coupled with the bitter jealousy she harbored toward Emma, led her to plot the horrific crime that would forever alter their lives. On the day of the attack, Christina had traveled to Emma and Torny's home, concealing herself in dark clothing to avoid detection. She waited for the right moment, entering the house shortly after Emma's last message to her sister. Fueled by her delusional obsession with Torny and her deep hatred for Emma, Christina carried out the brutal attack with a hammer, leaving the family in a pool of blood. The discovery of Christina's obsession, along with the incriminating evidence found on her devices, led investigators to conclude that she was the one responsible for the murders of Max and Saga, as well as the attempted murder of Emma. Christina's fixation on Torny had spiraled into a deadly rage, turning her into a cold and calculating killer who stopped at nothing to eliminate the family she believed stood in the way of her twisted fantasy. With the mounting evidence against Christina Shurer, the police moved swiftly to arrest her. The discovery of surveillance footage showing a figure matching Christina's description near the crime scene was a major breakthrough. Combined with the obsessive photos found on her laptop, which depicted Emma, Torny, and their children, the investigators had a solid case linking Christina to the brutal murders. The photos were accompanied by disturbing and threatening captions that revealed the depth of her jealousy and rage toward Emma. This evidence clearly pointed to her unhealthy obsession with Torny and her intent to destroy his new family. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Christina initially denied any involvement in the crime. When the police arrested her in Germany and brought her back to Sweden. She claimed that there had been a terrible mistake. She insisted that she had nothing to do with the massacre and that she hadn't even been near the crime scene on the night of the murders. However, the investigators weren't convinced. They had established her presence near Emma and Torney's house through both the surveillance footage and witness testimonies from neighbors who had seen a figure in dark clothing walking around suspiciously that evening. As Christina was brought to trial, her behavior grew increasingly erratic. In court, she maintained her innocence, but exhibited strange and unnerving conduct. She often smiled inappropriately, waved at people in the courtroom, and at one point even laughed when shown the gruesome crime scene photos of Emma and her children. Her unsettling reactions led some to question her mental state. It seemed as though she was disconnected from the gravity of the situation and the horrific crime she was accused of committing. Given her bizarre behavior, the court ordered a psychiatric evaluation to determine whether Christina was mentally fit to stand trial. If she were found to be suffering from severe mental illness, it could have significantly impacted her sentencing. However, the results of the psychiatric examination shocked many. The evaluation concluded that Christina was, in fact, sane. She was fully aware of her actions and understood the consequences of her behavior. Her strange demeanor in court, while disturbing, was not indicative of insanity, but rather suggested a calculated indifference to the suffering she had caused. The prosecution laid out a compelling case, detailing Christina's obsessive behavior toward Torney and the way her jealousy toward Emma had festered into violent rage. They highlighted how Christina had stalked the family, collected their photos, and plotted the attack. The evidence, including the surveillance footage, the threatening captions on the photos, and her presence near the crime scene painted a chilling picture of premeditated murder. Christina's defense team struggled to explain her actions. They argued that her long history of emotional instability and the heartbreak she had experienced after her breakup with Torney had driven her to commit the crime in a moment of irrationality. However, the evidence of her calculated planning and the fact that she had brought the murder weapon, a hammer, with her to the scene weakened their case. As the trial progressed, it became clear that Christina had meticulously planned the attack, and her obsession with Torney had led her to commit one of the most horrific crimes in recent Swedish history. Despite her claims of innocence and attempts to appear disconnected from the reality of the situation, the court found her guilty on all counts. In the end, Christina Shurer was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murders of Max and Saga, and for the attempted murder of Emma Young Stig. The judge also ordered her to pay $20,000 in compensation to Emma, a small gesture of justice for a woman who had lost her children and suffered a life-changing attack. Christina's chilling lack of remorse throughout the trial left a lasting impression on all who witnessed the proceedings, marking her as one of the most cold-blooded criminals in Swedish history. For Emma and Torney, the conclusion of the trial marked the end of a long and painful chapter, but it also signaled the beginning of their journey toward healing. The emotional toll of the crime had been overwhelming for both of them. Emma had not only lost her 2 children, but had also come dangerously close to losing her own life. She had spent months in the hospital recovering from her severe injuries, undergoing multiple surgeries to repair the damage inflicted during the attack. The physical scars would remain with her forever, but the emotional wounds were even deeper. During her recovery, Emma faced the unimaginable grief of losing Max and Saga. For weeks after the attack, she was unable to fully comprehend what had happened. Each time she was told of her children's deaths, her mind seemed to block out the reality, unable to accept the loss. It was only after she was brought back to the scene of the crime that the memories came flooding back, and she was forced to confront the full horror of that night. Torney, too, was deeply affected by the events. He had lost Max and Saga, whom he had come to love as his own children, and had nearly lost Emma as well. The guilt of not being able to protect his family weighed heavily on him, even though he knew there was nothing he could have done to prevent the tragedy. In the aftermath of the attack, Torney remained a constant source of support for Emma, standing by her side as she navigated her physical and emotional recovery. Despite the overwhelming pain, Emma and Torney chose to move forward with their lives. The bond between them grew stronger as they leaned on each other for comfort and healing. In the summer of 2010, 2 years after the attack, they decided to honor their original plans and got married in a small, intimate ceremony. It was a bittersweet moment, While they celebrated their love and commitment to each other, the absence of Max and Saga was deeply felt. Their loss would always be a part of their lives, a wound that time could never fully heal. Over the years, Emma and Torny worked hard to rebuild their lives. Emma's recovery was long and arduous, but she gradually regained her strength. The couple eventually had 2 more children together, providing them with a renewed sense of hope and purpose. They were determined to create a loving and safe environment for their new family, though they made sure their children knew about Max and Saga, honoring their memory as part of their lives. While life could never return to what it had been before the tragedy, Emma and Torny found a way to move forward, building a new life out of the ashes of their past. Emma became an advocate for victims of violence, sharing her story with others in the hopes of raising awareness about the dangers of obsessive relationships and the importance of mental health intervention. Her strength and resilience in the face of unimaginable loss became an inspiration to many. For Emma and Torny, the journey to healing was long and painful, but they emerged stronger, their love and commitment to each other unshakable. Though the memory of Max and Saga would forever be a part of their lives, they found a way to honor their children's legacy while building a future for themselves and their new family. The verdict against Christina Shurer brought justice, but it was their own strength and resilience that allowed Emma and Torny to find peace and hope once again. As the trial concluded and Christina Shurer was sentenced, the emotional toll of this case remained deeply felt by everyone involved. The brutal murder of Max and Saga and the near-fatal attack on Emma Young Stig left scars that would never fully heal. For Emma and Torny, the journey to recovery was long and filled with grief, but their resilience and strength allowed them to rebuild their lives, despite the unimaginable pain they had endured. This case serves as a tragic reminder of the dangerous consequences of obsession and unchecked mental health issues. It highlights how one person's unhealthy attachment can spiral into violence, tearing families apart and leaving devastation in its wake. Emma's story and her ability to find the courage to move forward is a testament to the human spirit's capacity for healing, even in the darkest of times. While justice was served with Christina's conviction, the heartbreak of losing 2 young lives will forever linger. As we reflect on the emotional impact of this case, it's important to remember that behind every crime, there are real people whose lives are forever altered. Their stories deserve to be told and remembered. Thank you for watching this episode and for allowing us to share Emma's tragic story. If you found this case as compelling as we did, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more true crime stories. We cover cases from around the world, delving into the minds of perpetrators and exploring the emotional and psychological toll these crimes take on victims and their loved ones. Stay tuned, and we'll see you in the next video.